List of 6 questions from the
Yep, I see it in the chat here. I'm good. Okay. Good. All righty, we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to What's New with Google My Business. My name is Carrie Hill. I'm pinch hitting for Andrew Shotland, who had some connection issues this morning, but the show must go on, right? I'm joined by Mike Blumenthal from Gather Up and Joy Hawkins from Sterling Sky out of Canada. And I think we're just going to, jump right into it and talk about what's new with Google My Business. We'll absolutely have time for Q&A at the end. I have some, preloaded questions I'd love to, handle and ask if we have time. And Joy, take it away.
All right, perfect. So I'm going to go through some of the recent things that we've been seeing in the last few months. Questions that have come up on various forums pertaining to Google My Business. So the first thing I'm going to go over is the issue with suspensions. If you guys are not really aware of what I'm referring to here, I'm going to kind of backtrack and explain what it is that prompted all of the Google My Business suspensions that we're seeing right now. So we have a kind of thing that happens quite frequently, unfortunately, with various businesses that we work with, where we'll see this kind of drop off in ranking. And when we go to look to see what is the cause of it, we see stuff like this. So when you do a search here for homeowners insurance in this area, you'll see that there are listings that come up in the local results that are pushing down legitimate businesses. So these 2 listings that are featured here, called Homeowners Insurance Provo, Homeowners Insurance Orem, these are not real businesses. These are lead gen listings that are created, and often the companies that sell these or create these are selling leads and phone calls to actual businesses. So this is kind of a very common issue that we see a lot. But back in the spring of this year, in around April, March time, it was insane. To a record that I've never seen before. I wrote an article on how much it was impacting attorneys. You can see here every single listing that I've highlighted is fake. So in this article, I kind of go into depth about it. 18 out of 20 listings on the first page results here were actually fake listings. They weren't real attorneys. They were lead gen listings that were selling leads to attorneys. So kind of as a rebuttal to this, there was an article that was published in June by the Wall Street Journal, talked a lot about this problem, and right around the same time that this published, we saw an insane amount of suspension issues on forums everywhere. It happened around June 18th. We started seeing complaints on the Google My Business forum, on the forum that I own called the Local Search Forum. I linked to a thread here that goes into detail about it, where a lot of agencies are chiming in and talking about how many suspensions that they are getting. So I believe these 2 things are connected, the amount of spam that we saw in the spring and then the wave of suspensions that hit after. This caused another kind of problem, which Google actually posted about at the end of June, where they're talking about their support team being backlogged. This is due to the number of suspensions and reinstatements that are coming in as a result. So when all these listings got suspended, unfortunately, there were a lot of legitimate businesses that also got suspended. And now those businesses are filing to get reinstated, but because there are so many of them, currently the wait time to hear back is somewhere between, currently it's about 3 weeks. So that unfortunately hasn't changed, and we're now in August, but hopefully it will decrease. The good news in all of this is that it did sort of solve the problem. This is a before and after shot, like when I was talking about those listings that were appearing that we were seeing such a high volume of. In March, the top 3 listings that appeared for car accident attorney were all fake. Now they're all real businesses. So it did actually hit, I guess, the networks that Google was trying to hit. There was just this side effect that unfortunately also impacted legitimate businesses as well. So if you're in that boat and you are currently facing a suspension, you're most definitely not alone. Another thing that came up recently is this issue with missing reviews on Google. So we saw this happen to various number of clients of ours. It came up a lot on the forum threads. We actually had it happen to one of our own reviews here at Sterling Sky. So just to clarify, these were like real customers, nothing wrong with the way that we're soliciting reviews or anything. But this is unfortunately another thing that often happens as Google is trying to fix these problems. There are real things that get nixed in the way. So we see reports like this where people are saying, you know, they're losing like 3 reviews every day. We're seeing other people that are saying they lost like 30 or 40. And when asked Google about this, this is unfortunately intentional. So Google put out a statement that I linked to on that thread there, talking about this problem, but it's not actually a problem. This was intentional. And again, Google trying to fight spam, there's always going to be this effect where unfortunately you get legitimate reviews or listings that get caught up in it, but it's not a bug. Third thing is the product's beta. So kind of more on a positive note, the product's beta has launched, I believe, in June, and this is what it looks like. So it's very visible. This is an example of a florist, and you'll see all of the products listed there in the knowledge panel. Really cool feature. It actually gets placed higher in the knowledge panel on desktop than posts do. So it's literally right below the core information. And that's really cool. Here's another example. This is a real estate agent. Really creative kind of use of it. They did some floor plans. We've done, you know, similar things with attorneys. Attorneys don't have products, they have services, but we're still utilizing the product section due to how visible it is. And you can do all kinds of kind of neat and creative things with it. People were asking me, I actually had a question come up because I published a whole thing on this in my training guide that I update every month. And I had someone ask me, you know, what's the difference between the products versus Google product posts? Because it's a bit confusing. So I'll kind of clarify. The Google product posts do not function the same way. So for example, they only show up for 7 days when you post them on desktop, like in the post section. They do live forever on mobile, but they get placed above the products. So it's kind of a little confusing. But you'll see here, these ones are product posts. These ones are the Google Products Beta. On mobile, both of them are kind of not overly visible. The big thing is for the Google Products Beta is on desktop. On desktop, they are super visible, as I highlighted in the previous thing. And then also the products beta are not time sensitive in the sense that they're not like posts where they're being featured in the post section for 7 days. They are sticky, so they stay there kind of permanently. Next, I'll cover just a quick update to the questions and answers feature on Google My Business. This is something I actually covered quite extensively. And now when you go onto a listing and you post a question, Google tries to answer it for you before you even post. So at first, when this rolled out, they were pulling information from review content. So, you know, if I type in what are your specials, it actually pulls in like content from a review that mentions the word special. Now it's also pulling in content from Google Posts, and it's also pulling in content from the Google My Business Products Beta. So it's becoming more of a, you know, at first we were kind of like, oh, these Google My Business features, there's so many of them, they're time consuming if you extensively try to keep them updated, and they don't seem to really impact ranking. So what's the value of them? This is one way I think that there is value to spending time on posts. Here's an example where it's pulling in products. So, you know, if I'm like, hey, do you have tulips? They're pulling in a post of this florist, and it's, the product that the florist uploaded for tulips, which is kind of cool. The fifth thing, which I'm sure Mike will have some comments on after this, is the local scroll pack. I guess that's what we've called it. And this is I'd say it's kind of a test that Google's doing. I've run across a handful of people that are able to trigger it. There's a guy I was talking to at MozCon that was able to get it on his phone. I have yet to see it. Mike has covered this extensively, so I linked to his blog article here. But this is what it looks like, essentially, and apologize, this was actually a GIF, but it didn't translate into the PDF. But it's a search for Starbucks. You'll see instead of getting a traditional 3-pack, it actually shows just one result, half of a second result until you start scrolling with your thumb. And then there's all these options to expand. Like it gives you options to expand to only show you ones that have Wi-Fi or ones that are highly recommended and various things. Mike goes into a lot more detail about that in his post, but this is not something that is rolled out yet. It is something that is just currently kind of in testing mode. I'd say probably 1% or less of people can even trigger it at the moment. I secretly am hoping that it doesn't roll out because I don't like it. But yeah, if you have questions about that, I would definitely put them in the chat log, and I'm sure I'll defer answers to Mike since he's actually the one that's been able to trigger these. I'll quote something from his article here on why he thinks this is problematic. He mentions, like, you know, Starbucks. we're at the top. But then when you scroll down and expand under the best section, Starbucks wasn't represented at all. So it kind of brings reviews into play and a lot of other things that traditionally were not, there with the traditional 3-pack. And here's another example of how it looks with ads. So ads kind of really stand out here. You can see that 3-pack ad taking up a lot of space, and it's like competing with like 1.5 results, which is pretty substantial. Sixth thing I'm going to cover is just citations. So this is not a new thing, but there have been a lot of discussions recently, so I wanted to include it around citations. So Darren Shaw did a really cool presentation at MozCon, one of my favorite ones of the entire conference. And what he did is he took this business that didn't have anything, didn't have a website, didn't have citations, didn't have any type of SEO efforts. And he took the business and basically did all these different things that normally an SEO company would do one by one so that he could measure the impact. And I thought it was really interesting coming from Darren, who runs a company that is based on citations. So he is, like, when you think about it, if he had something to kind of make him want to say a certain thing, it would be that citations do impact rankings, right? So he's got no motive here to kind of fabricate any of this. But he talked about how, like, if the citations, when he got to the point where he built citation, it had an impact on ranking. And it was pretty much very minimal from what he was showing here in the graphs in his presentation. And he really gets deeper into it in the blog article that he posted that goes over the entire presentation. But it kind of led to a lot of other discussions. There was an article on Street Fight Mag that Mike Blumenthal and David Mim did about this. And then Greg Sterling covered one on Search Engine Land that I've linked to here, where he kind of talks about local citations and the impact. And I feel like this is probably the #1 thing that I got asked at MozCon, which surprised me. I had a lot of SEOs coming up to me and be like, what do you think of Yext? And what do you do with citations? And a lot of them were very surprised to hear that at my agency, we really don't focus on citations much, and we haven't for ages, because we don't find that they actually move the needle as far as ranking goes. Andrew Shotland weighs in. He has a lot of information on the subject coming from like a big brand perspective. So it's a really great article. I would suggest you guys check out here. I'll quote a few of the tidbits here from the people that were on this panel. Andrew was kind of an advocate a bit for citations. He was talking about, if you manage a lot of locations, you get a lot of these Google updates where Google's, changing the phone number or category. And this could be a big giant pain for big brands. So it kind of is a bit of an argument for why you still want to consider citations. Mike talks about, how Google at some point used to really rely on third-party data, but they don't as much anymore. So, there's, especially, I would definitely agree with him that there is no need for recurring cost for citations. That's the stance that I take. And then my take on it was, like I mentioned, we really don't focus much on citations at my agency. We really want to do things that are going to drive up phone calls and conversions. And we really only deal with citations if the client's moved. And even in that case, we find it doesn't make a big difference. So here's a screenshot from my presentation at the last Local U Advanced, where I talked about a client and they had moved and we didn't do anything with citations. All we did was update their website and their Google My Business listing. Literally the only 2 places we touched, and nothing negative happened whatsoever with the rankings or with their traffic. We slowly updated the citations over the next 6 months, but we weren't in a rush to do it, and we saw absolutely no negative impact. And this is using Semrush here. You can kind of see the traffic, but we were doing a lot of work on the site, to help increase traffic, but on the same side, we didn't see any negative impact when he moved, even though citations weren't updated. So I guess now we'll jump into Q&A, and I'll kind of hand this back over to Carrie. I do keep track of local SEO changes. I'm kind of a bit obsessed with them. So I do have this timeline that's free on my website if you want to see other things that have happened recently. And yeah, Carrie, over to you.
Great, thanks, Joy. I guess we'll just jump into Q&A, and I'll fill mine in as needed. Ed McMasters asks, how do you check and see or know that you have a suspension or a client is suspended? So how do you know that there's a suspension?
Yeah, so I've actually heard mixed results on this, because it usually says it's suspended when you log into the Google My Business dashboard, but I don't believe they send you like an email alert or anything. One of 2 things will happen depending on what type of suspension it is. So either the listing will vanish, like it won't show up anywhere, it doesn't exist on maps at all, or it'll just become unverified, so it still exists, but you don't have the ability to access it. Inside Google My Business, it should give you the suspended message though on the listing, and I think that happens like 99% of the time. There's been the odd edge case where people see their listing non-existent, but it doesn't actually say suspended in the dashboard, but 99% of the time you want to check the Google My Business dashboard to see.
Okay, great. The next question is from J Holmes, the letter J. I don't know what the J stands for. It says, I would like to hear the experts' thoughts on GMB short names.
So I'll take a shot at it. Clearly, when Google rolled it out, they effed it up seriously, and it caused instant suppression of a listing, and with its removal, those listings came back. They seem to have fixed that problem. It's an interesting feature. It has some limitations. Google has, for example, limited your ability to pick certain broad match keywords with it. So even if you want it, you can't get it. They also have this issue with it where if somebody else claims your name and then gives it up, it is held back for some period of time to kind of prevent people from abusing the system. But it's primarily intended by Apple or by Google, I think, as a long-term transactional interface. So right now we're seeing just the beginning of it with you can use the short name plus the word review, and it will take you to the review box. But I think long haul, it will be very significant. Short haul, most people already have figured out how to get people to the review box, so it has very little value. It doesn't have a lot of significance right now. I think the main thing is getting your short name that you like and sort of waiting until it becomes more valuable.
So Mike, GatherUp actually had an instance where another brand claimed the GatherUp short name and then released it. How long have you guys gotten it yet?
Yes. So the other brand claimed it as part of a test, and we attempted to claim it. We just got it back last week, so it was about a month that it was held sort of back after it had been inappropriately used. So I suppose if you're looking for a way to make your competitor annoyed, go claim his name and release it.
The flip side of that is be prepared for them to call you out on it.
Yes, I mean, it doesn't serve anybody, but
yeah,
but one of the annoying things about it is it does get held back. So, and we don't know Google's not saying how long. And in our case, I'm not sure if a month is illustrative or they freed it up because I complained about it. Who knows why they freed it up?
Right. I think that for securing your brand, if that's the short name you want to do, is important. But as far as doing something with it, I think that's pretty limited at this point in time, like Mike said.
Google has indicated that they're going to use it transactionally, right? And we are seeing this move by Google to move towards this idea of helping people get things done. That means with the new advent of the quote button every place and the reserve buttons and the book buttons and all those buttons that they're putting out there, I think that ultimately it'll become a quick way for people to get a quote and reserve a spot.
Right. So short name plus quote would take you right to the quote interface or something like that.
You should test that, Joy.
The next question we have is from Jeffrey Medema. Sorry, butchered that. Is there any method by which you can appeal to get removed legitimate reviews back?
Not that I've seen. I know every time that we have tried to on the forum, we get like the default response that no, because I think when they're algorithmically removed, I think it's like harder for them to get them back. I don't know what happens behind the scenes, but our answer's always been no that we've been told.
Yeah, so there's no procedure.
No.
Thing.
Sucks,
okay.
I mean, the suggestion is to keep getting reviews and to recognize that because they use a big data AI machine learning approach that is only accurate to a certain percentage. It could be 70 or 80% that this is going to happen. It has always happened and it will continue to happen. And the review algorithm seems to go through in waves, and then people start abusing it more, and then they upgrade it. It goes through more waves. This has been going on since 2010, I think was the first review removals, and it will continue. It's just the nature of the beast. Very aggravating. But if your review matches the profile, in some way of what the machine has determined is a profile fake review. It's going to get nailed. So
right. So the tactic is don't worry about Google removing that because you're the 20 to 30% collateral damage at that point, and worry more about just getting more good reviews, right?
that's easy to say, but when it's your
Right.
30 reviews that remove,
Sure.
it's very annoying. But
Absolutely.
yes, ultimately that is the reality, and people need to get used to it. That's when our lives are driven by AI, ML, that's what you get is 70, 80, 90% accurate. Same reason with the suspensions. Google applied their new machine learning algorithm to it, and it made some mistakes, and those people were out of business for a long time. At least with those, Google was able to recover them, thank God, although it took 3 to 4 weeks.
Right. We have a question from Dean Douay, and I'm not exactly, it might need some clarification on this, Dean, if you're still listening. The question is, when will products be available? Does products beta not available to everybody now, or maybe internationally it's not? I'm not sure what the question is. Do you guys know what he's talking about?
Yeah, so most likely if you don't see it in your dashboard, so we have a large number of clients that don't have it. And the thing I've been told, which I'm trying to get clarification on, is it has something to do with G Suite. So it is supposed to be rolled out to everybody, but for some reason, Google accounts that are using G Suite, there is some issue with it versus the product beta. I have no idea why, but there's quite a few listings that we have that don't have it that are connected to G Suite accounts. And so far, to my knowledge, there's no fix for it. Like I've contacted Google My Business Support to see if they can get around it and enable them. I haven't gotten anywhere yet, but when I find a solution or we hear back from Google, I'll definitely tweet about it.
Okay, great. Next question is from Lisa Carr. For a service-related organization, is there an alternative to the products feature, or is there a way to creatively use products for services? I have a client who I have entered their products as like hot water heater installation as a product, and it works. I don't know how legit it is, but it works.
So we've totally done them for lawyers, and lawyers don't have products, but we've been seeing conversion from them already. So I would 100% add your services as products. I mean, the products label looks stupid, but the actual way the feature looks on Google, it makes sense regardless if they're actual products or not.
Yeah, speaking of stupid label, Barbara Oliver still has the word menu instead of
Right.
services on her knowledge panel for unknown reasons to me.
A jeweler with a menu in the menu tab, right? It's the tab on the knowledge panel. That's silly. The next question is from Brian Bloom. He wants to know what if you link to the CID, not the website in citations, would that work better? CID, that's the maps listing, right?
0 times 0 is 0. So
right.
My answer would be that I don't think so, but test it and let us know.
Right.
Yeah. I have heard about this strategy quite a bit. Actually, it's come up a lot on forums. We haven't tested it yet. It's on our list to test, but I'm very skeptical of it because citations as a whole don't really make an impact very much. So I don't know, but I haven't tested it.
I want to qualify the word citations too. So let me give you a little history. I went back and read my blog posts about them from 2006. Originally, Google called them web references, not citations. And when David was writing his first article, he emailed me frantically for that name, and he couldn't find my article. And so he called them citations. Now, so historically, citations have taken on the meaning of structured citations. But in the original research we did in 2006, 2007, Google referred to a web reference as any time they could associate a reference about a business to that business entity. So it could be any mention, either structured or not structured, that they could associate. And in my research, what was showing up in 2006, and we think is still important under web references, is things like articles in significant newspapers that they can associate with your business. Well, that's a form of a web reference, or what David was calling a citation, but it's not structured. Citations are still valuable if they're done creatively. In a case in point is Yelp. I mean, Yelp is a citation, but it has no value in and of itself unless Yelp starts throwing link juice to that page that you're on, which they start doing if you start getting more reviews than the next guy in your category and in your field, and you start getting ranked as a Yelp top 10, we've seen dramatic impacts from that. But that's because the page it's on is being given page rank by Yelp, not because it's a citation. So you have to realize that to get value out of any of these things, they have to have prominence. And to get prominence, they've got to be linked to or shared or whatever Google's criteria is.
Great.
So there's no easy way to scale it, I guess.
Sure. I think Joy had a really good quote. I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it right. But in that article that Greg Sterling wrote, it was something like, we don't concentrate on citations because there are other things that make our clients more money. That's the paraphrase of it.
Right.
I think that's kind of the approach we all have to, consider taking to it. I mean, make sure that the big spots are good. Things that people might use to find your location, if that's important, if you're a brick and mortar. But other than that, I mean, it's a tactic of diminishing return, I would call it.
I have an interesting case study of a small restaurant that I've been working with a Google My Business website, because that's all they could afford, and they had a Facebook page. They have tremendous nap confusion at their address because they're like the 4th restaurant in this building over the last 4 years. So you go back and you can find numerous cases of the phone number. They don't have a listing at TripAdvisor. They just got a listing at Yelp. Yelp still has the wrong places listed. Mm-hmm. And we've been able to succeed using just a Google My Business website in spite of all that. Now, maybe if I cleaned those up, since I was doing what I was doing for free, I didn't feel like it was my obligation to clean them up. But maybe if we clean them up, we'd see a bump. I will report back. But so far, we've been able to overcome that, or it has not been an impediment to her growth. Mm-hmm. Links have helped, reviews have helped.
Right.
And she only has a few citations. So.
Right. So there's it doesn't hurt, but we're not sure if it helps much either.
But it costs time and money.
Yeah, and it's expensive. Citation work is expensive because it's busy work.
And particularly if you're hooked for an annual fee.
Yep.
It's one thing to do it once and done.
Mm-hmm. But then I would definitely do it once. Like, especially there are a lot of really cheap packages out there now. A lot of them are done overseas, but like doing them once, I think makes perfect sense. At least the top like 20, 30. But yeah, paying an annual fee, I can't justify.
No, I agree. That model's gone. So can we move on? Are we good with that one? The next question is about service area businesses. Ferdi Passion from View Local, sorry if I messed your name up. How are the service-related businesses that don't have a physical address, like plumbers who service an area? I think he means how do they succeed, or how are they ranked? And is it recommended for the plumber to publish its physical address in GMB? So service area business is a whole other hot mess of Google, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. So I'll start. I'm sure Mike has stuff to add to this. So as far as showing your address, if you can put like permanent signage on your address, like, so if it's your home address, for example, there are some service area businesses that can have signs that are on their house, on their lawn. They have to be permanent. So, you can't just like take up a sign to your window according to, if you're wanting to stay compliant anyways, if you do my business guidelines. But if you can do that, I would. I do think there's a lot of benefits to having your address showing. There's actually a thread on the local search forum about this that got a lot of activity where people were time and time again coming on and talking about how hiding your address results in less phone calls, which is really interesting. But enough people are saying that they've tried it and tested it. I'm not ballsy enough to test it on my clients because I don't want them to get suspended for showing their address. But a lot of people are coming on and saying that there is a difference. So you get more visibility by showing your address, which is crazy, but apparently a thing. As far as like not being in the city that you service, so if you live outside of the main city, unfortunately, as far as Google is concerned, your only option is to get an address inside the city that you're allowed to use. And I don't suggest buying one on Fiverr or using employee houses. I've had a couple creative ways that people have done it. So like one is a friend of mine whose business partner lives in one city and he lives in the other. So he used his business partner's address as the main address because it's in a much better area. There's nothing wrong with that. The other way would be, I have another guy that I know who owns rental properties. So he actually owns like 3 or 4 properties that he rents out, and he actually used one of his condos as the address for his listing because that's in a prominent city. And I mean, technically, he has the authority for that address and he owns it. So it's again, kind of a gray issue, but you're not going to run into any issues if you do that strategy.
I would add that Google has gotten a lot better at identifying service area businesses, and particularly ones that are violating the guidelines, and have suspended a lot more of them. So as Joy said, if you're going to do it, if you're going to add an address, if you're going to fake it, you got to fake it really, really well with signage and et cetera. That's issue one. I think issue two is that service area businesses have been a huge vector of spam for Google, been very easy to abuse. And issue three in this is that I think that Google is on a long-term plan to get it squared away. We're seeing the beginnings of that with the suspensions and the harsher requirements, but I think at some point they will figure out how to effectively distribute visits to businesses without an address. It's not yet, but I think they will get there.
Good. The next question is from Ann Schmitter. Should photos for GMB posts be geotagged for the business, and does it make a difference?
Oh, Mike, I'm making you answer this one.
You know, with everything tested, most photos are already geotagged. Most photos in the world are taken on your iPhone or your Android. Those already come in geotagged. So I can't see any huge benefit. I mean, unless you have some real old camera that's not geotagging photos. Again, it's this investment of time versus money. I would test it, but I cannot, and I can't theoretically come up with any reason why your geotag's better than the one on the camera. I suppose if you're faking your videos and faking your addresses on a fake listing, you'd want to geotag it because otherwise Google might
or using stock. Or using stock,
right,
which you should not be doing in your Google My Business photos. So,
but even then, if you uploaded stock, I think Google would recognize if the business listing is legitimate. They're going to recognize it. The only thing I can say is test it. Let me know. I doubt it.
So Joel Headley, I'll quote him because I asked him extensively about this. He told me that they get tagged the moment you upload them. So when you upload photos inside Google My Business to a place, they get geotagged at that place because they are literally associated with that place. And one thing we did notice, we were testing this, is that if you upload photos with like all this extra data added onto it,
stuff.
Yeah, that stuff, and then you download it later, it's not there. And I know that's probably for privacy reasons, because if you upload a photo to Google My Business that's got someone's home address on it, for example, you know, you can't, Google's got to protect that data. So I think it's really questionable. I personally would not invest a single minute.
Yeah. Well, and if, as Joel says, Google tags it when you upload it, they might strip all of that EXIF off of there and paste their own tag on there. We don't know, but that's another one of those diminishing return or no return tactics. I wouldn't worry about it, in my opinion.
We haven't tested it. I plan on publishing it, but it's like one of those things where like we got to test this on a bunch of different businesses, and so far, honestly, I haven't been able to show that it does anything.
Right. Well, Mike, we were talking in Last Week in Local about the physical visits to a location, possibly as part of that new patent that Bill Slosky wrote about. And I mean, you could maybe make a case for that being tied in there, but I don't see Google allowing somebody to gain that by putting their own geo information on a photo that's uploaded. I think that they'd nix that, in my opinion. Eric Schwartzman asks, I know we're focusing on local SEO here, but is the importance of citation indexing also waning in global search as well? Yes.
I mean, we certainly see low-level directories not getting indexed, and you have to make some extra effort to even get them indexed. When they do get indexed, they have very low prominence because these pages are buried, you know, knee-deep in crappy pages. Google's not that interested in them. So the answer, I would, you know, from my point of view, at least what I've seen, is that low-quality page is a low-quality page, and it doesn't have much value.
I think it's important too to remember, like, why would Google index a citation? It doesn't have anything unique on it. Like, it's literally just a copy of something they already have and is already listed on, you know, like 20 other sites. So you hear all this stuff about like Google filtering duplicate data. Citations are literally duplicate data unless they have like Yelp user-generated content on them, like reviews or photos or whatever. I don't see any reason why Google.
Well, and now that Google, like
citations.
Mike said previously in a conversation we had, Google's not rebuilding their index every 6 weeks from whatever they find out there. So that's even less important as we move forward. Elena Lathrop has a question. What's going on with verifying physical locations via postcard?
You mean besides the fact that the GMB is a one big cluster at fuck?
Yeah. She says we've sent out several recently. I think she means they've had several sent to them recently, but none of them have surfaced even after waiting several weeks. Is there another way to verify? Like get with somebody who can do instant verifications maybe?
I'll look up the link. There's a form you can fill out. If you've requested at least twice, and I'll pull it up here. There is a form you can get in contact with Google and they will do a video verification usually.
Oh, awesome.
Right. The failure, sometimes the failure of a card to show is one more, in other words, spam prevention technique by Google. The listing was good enough to be allowed to verify to that point, but the card's not sent because of additional information that Google uncovers. So it's a very difficult question to answer. Could be the post office screwed up, could be the person receiving the mail screwed up. But as Joy pointed out, if you've tried twice, Google will support you in the effort if it's a legitimate listing.
Great. Another question. We have lots of questions, by the way. Another question from E.T. Moore Manufacturing, Inc. How much impact do posts have? And I would say a lot. And it depends, right? That's our standard answer.
So a traditional post with a call to action has relatively low conversions. It's probably higher than a Facebook post conversion, that's from the research we've seen. It does influence to some extent Google's knowledge about your business in terms of the products you carry and things you do. And it does now surface in the Google Q&A. So there is value to a post beyond direct ranking and the limited conversions. There's the ability to control your presence on that page, particularly on mobile. There's the ability to influence Google's broad understanding of your business, potentially expand your reach. There's also some new capabilities with posts, like this ability to offer a coupon to a new follower. I've got to believe that feature could have value. And Google's looking for a million other signals to rank your business. You get a lot of followers that come to visit your place and cash the coupon in. That's got to be a strong signal, like we talked about with visits. So I think that there's broad value to it. It's important, like all these things, that you not invest a gazillion hours in it and that you measure the value so that the value you get is what you give. I think if you're already posting to Facebook, it's very trivial to cross-post. It's trivial to get some good tools to automate posts, at least on businesses less 9 or smaller locations. So I think there's value to it in terms of branding and visuals. It's not as concrete, the value in terms of conversions or rank.
I think there's two things that make it worth it for me, one of which is real estate. So at the bottom of most even local knowledge panels, there's the like 3 or 4 people also searched for or something. So that's where they kind of poke your competitors in there at the bottom sometimes. If I've got a post in there, I just took up a bunch more scroll space that pushes that down the page. So I like it from that aspect. I also like the fact that now they're surfacing snippets from posts over into your maps listing results if they're relevant to the query. And I think that that's another big opportunity for you to enhance the look of your listing, or why pick me over this one? Well, I have more stuff in mind, kind of thing.
And finally, with restaurants at least, photos from posts go to your photos update, so it keeps your photos fresh as well with one step.
So
yes.
I definitely want to add something here, and then Andrew sent something, so I'll weigh in. I'll repeat what he said from him. We've actually completely changed our strategy on posts in the last 6 months. So if you had asked me like 6 months ago what we were doing versus what we're doing now, it's totally different. So we were doing a lot of tests, and I used to say that it was useless to post about your products or services because they don't really catch people's eye and they don't convert well, which is, I would say, probably still true. But because of the snippet feature that you were talking about, Carrie, we have basically changed that. We now are trying to post an individual post about a certain product or service for at least all of the products and services that they offer, because of that snippet that got pulled in. And I just checked when I did this morning, not even like a couple hours ago, it's already got the snippet from a post that I just posted this morning.
And that
So,
same snippet will answer the Q&A question as well. So it has multiple
right,
values.
so it's got like additional value that it didn't have before.
So here's a question that I think I know the answer to, but I'd love confirmation from you guys. So if that post falls off in 7 days, that snippet could still possibly be pulled in, right? So even though we're not physically seeing the post, the text could still be pulled into a snippet.
Yes,
right?
and that's why we were like, oh my gosh, like we realized that because we see it for posts that were like posted 8 months ago or a year ago. So it's not like you have to continually post new stuff all the time for all your products and services, but at least having one post for each major thing that you do that talks about that thing and uses all kinds of like other related keywords. So, if you're a lawyer, talk about the word case or results or things along with the different types of law cases or crimes that you help with or whatnot.
Google is a beast for data, and this is a source of data to them, which, if semantically structured, like Joy just said, can expand the reach of your business or enhance Google's understanding of your business in broader areas. I recommend it to everybody.
I'll read off what Andrew put here too. He said, for him, posts they see great ROI on, even at a low conversion rate, because they show for branded queries and they're easy to do, right? So it's very low effort.
You can even use tools and automate them. So you put them in a spreadsheet and upload them once a week or once a month or whatever that looks like. And it's kind of a no-brainer for me. Why not? You should. I mean, it's free.
Yeah.
Well, time. It only costs time, right?
Yeah. Track them.
Jeffrey Medema asks, for a business with multiple locations and one website, would you recommend that the GMB pages link to location pages on the website, or should they all link to the homepage? I vote for location pages.
It depends, right? It depends on how many location pages, how strong those location pages are. If there's only 3 or 4 locations, they probably will perform better linking to the homepage and making clear in the footer and how the user can get more information about the location and be included in the footer. But once you get to 50 or 100, that strategy doesn't work. And so there's this continuum from it's not a simple answer. You got 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. I think your homepage is going to give you more prominence to each listing. And the trick is to not confuse the customer. So you can go as many locations as you can provide a good customer experience for. Beyond that, you better be switching because you're going to be losing sales. Doesn't matter whether you rank higher or not.
See, and I vote for the location page because as a consumer, if I'm looking at a specific location and I click on the website button, I don't want to have to then hunt around the website to find that location. So
it depends though on the service and the product and the interface on the website. There's no one answer to this, but there is a gain to be had in the smaller quantities of locations by linking to the homepage, because the homepage is more prominent typically than the location pages. Over time, I think a location page strategy makes sense. I use 10 as the arbitrary cutoff number, but it also means that you got to think about good internal linking to the location pages. You got to think about link building to the location pages. It's more expensive and more work, but it's long haul, probably a better customer experience and can serve you well if done thoroughly and well.
Yeah, I actually covered this in my MozCon presentation because we did a test on it. We changed clients' GMB listing from taking it from the location page to the homepage, and we saw a significant increase in the amount of searches that they showed up for. So we were looking specifically at search query volume inside Google My Business Insights, and there was like this sharp lift on the graph when we switched it over. We also saw increases when we looked at the ranking tracker, but the biggest thing we were looking at was like how it increased search volume.
Was that for a single location business or multi-location?
They have about 5 or 6 locations.
Interesting.
It also depends on the business. How do they handle the phone calls, right? I mean, it's like if there's a single point of entry for the customer, they're going to get the same experience. There's a lot of variables.
Yeah, it's easy to test.
This question, I sort of get it. Let's see if you guys do. If you can, we have a lot of events that take place at a particular location/arena, but Google My Business only allows one company per address. How can we address this? No pun intended. We'd like to have a listing. If you don't control that location, you're not eligible for a listing, right?
That's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah. So like my church hosts AA meetings all the time, for example. The AA organization would not allowed to be able to create a listing using like my church's address.
Right. So the better tactic would be to do event posts within your own Google My Business and list the events on your website and, market it that way, in my opinion.
You can also put schema on your website on the event listings, and then it'll actually get pulled into that location's knowledge panel. So we see this all the time.
And it will also show up in the Google search. If you search events plus city, gives you a great big list of things.
Yeah.
Your events will show up there as well. So,
Yep.
And if you can't do schema on your website, then get the events posted at Meetup or Eventbrite. If they're free, you'll get similar markup and inclusion.
Right.
Although the website's better because, again, it's more likely to generate website traffic.
Jay Holmes asks, do you recommend running ads directly through the GMB account versus a Google Ads account?
That's all you, Joy.
Depends on your budget. So if you're spending less than $1,000 a month, use something like AdWords Express. Like it's much easier and faster. If you're spending like $5,000 a month on Google Ads, you definitely should be utilizing the full-blown ads Google Ads account with an agency or someone helping you monitor it. So
and I think that really depends upon how much control you want to have. If you only want to bid on a specific set of keywords in a specific location, you don't have that control in AdWords Express. So, I mean, I think the budget is definitely a good indicator, but also like how granular do you want to be with your ads? Because if you're using AdWords Express
does allow you to set zip codes, and it allows you to set negative keywords. So it's gotten better, and it has improved. I mean, to me, the issue is, do you do AdWords Express or do you pay Charter or one of those characters to charge you $700 a month for a crappy AdWords campaign? You do AdWords Express. Mm-hmm. But like I'm with Joy. I mean, as soon as you get over a certain dollar volume with the right consultant and or manager of the account, you're going to get better performance, generally speaking. But if it's poorly managed, you might as well do AdWords Express.
Interesting. Markella Haynes actually has a really good question. I've seen competitors Google My Business answers coming up if there isn't more info from reviews posts to answer the question, i.e., if we don't sell tulips but a competitor does, will it bring the other business into the Q&A suggested answers? I've never seen that happen.
I haven't either. The other competitor could ask a question, do you sell tulips? And somebody could answer, Joe's down the street sells tulips. Yeah. That's possible. And it's an interesting thought about tactics.
Yeah, because there's no way to remove those questions and answers. So if the competitor asked the question, somebody answered it with their brand name, and then it got voted up, that could very likely surface.
I don't know if a competitor's brand name would be a reason for removal by Google or not. Be an interesting test, wouldn't it, Joy?
Removing spammy Q&As, though, is actually really easy to do.
It is easy, but the question is, if the Q&A met all criteria, but it included a competitor's name in the answer, is that a reason for it to be removed?
Interesting.
I still flag it.
Yeah, I'd flag it too, for sure.
Well, yeah, as a brand owner, of course you'd fight it. I just wonder if Google would be sympathetic to your plight.
Yeah, we know how sympathetic they are. It's right? One of the attributes of artificial intelligence. It's very sympathetic.
We have a few more questions. We might not get to all of them. We've got about 10 minutes left, but we'll try and bust through as many as we can. Nicola Kent asks, how do you stop other places from adding an event to your GMB page? Example, a clinic offering services for women had a church event on their GMB page against them. This is a problem. I know Tim Capper has covered this quite extensively with events not related to the business showing up in the knowledge panel. And because it's all done by AI on Google side, it's very hard to fight this, unfortunately.
I would start producing events
Yeah,
for the
push it.
church's GMB.
Yeah, so
you can get it removed if you contact Google My Business Support if it's not actually an event at your place. We had this happen for a client where like some random thing was posted on another site and it wasn't even an event happening at his office. It had nothing to do with him. They just had wrong data on this other site and listed his address. But we were able to get Google My Business Support to remove it. So if it's wrong data, they'll remove it.
Right, and I think Carrie's idea is to have your own events probably works well in tandem with it.
yeah, so your own events marked up is probably more authoritative, and Google would be more likely to show that than something they're pulling in from a third party somewhere. So I would make sure your like Sunday school events are marked up, and or whatever, your clinic events. So all of those are marked up on your own website for sure. Bracewell Webworks asks, I have a client with a duplicate GMB page. He no longer has a login for the duplicate, so he can't log in to delete it. I've requested it be removed several times with no luck. Any suggestions?
For me, I find that these sort of orphan pages often have one or two details that are different than the main page. And if you go in with some amount of editing cred, in other words, you've been an editor or you have friends that are editors, and you make suggestions to the orphan page so that it gets changed to exactly the same as the main page. And that's down to every detail. Then when you request, and make sure that they're physically, the pins are physically the same spot and all the data is exactly the same. Then when you request to be the duplicate being merged or removed, it happens. If you can't get it yourself, then reaching out to Google support, which right now is a laborious, time-consuming. It takes a long time for them to respond, but they can be helpful with that for sure as well. But I found just editing it so that, and you get your edits approved, so it's exactly the same, and then requesting a merger typically works. But do you have anything to add to that, Joy?
Yeah, I'd probably actually take a totally different approach, but I think it might be faster. But the thing with suggest and edit is that if it's a claimed listing, it has such a power over that listing, unfortunately. So I think getting the listing unverified is key, and I would try and claim it. It will tell you that it's already been claimed. It'll then prompt the current owner. You have to wait 7 days, but after 7 days, it will allow you to claim it yourself. And once you claim it yourself, you can unverify it and then get Google to remove it. So I think that should be faster than suggest and edit. I find like turnaround.
Do you ever run into problems though trying to claim the same listing into it? If they think it's the same, then they're going to give you that message about.
If that happens, then I would contact Google My Business Support because they ultimately don't want a service area business to have two listings anyways. So they should help you.
So here's a sort of related question. Heather Hardy writes, we're having trouble with the duplicate page. The client made 2 pages. One was suspended. Do we need to deactivate the duplicate one, meaning that the one that's not suspended, while we wait for the suspended appeal? So they've appealed the suspension of the
I think
one.
I need to stand on my head and read that sideways to understand. Just said,
I think I just leave it alone until Google tells me what to do. Yeah,
it sounds like that's correct. If you have a duplicate listing and then that listing got suspended, you are left with just one listing, which is what you want. Right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe was it suspended because it's a
let me give you
duplicate,
Joy's email. You can email her.
The next question, we've got time for a couple more. What is the Google My Business criteria for selecting one GMB listing instead of another within the same company for an international search on a local service? This is a rent-a-car company.
Prominence and relevance.
Right. So how close you are to the searcher and how
prominent the particular entity is.
Right.
So a lot of times we'll see, particularly with new offices opening, they won't show where the older offices will because the older offices have more links, more web mentions, more reviews, whatever, and those give Google the confidence that it's more relevant to the query.
SWAT Cinema asks, hello, any updates on Google Maps event postings? or ways to remove events that appear there. We already answered this, not from your organization. Yeah, so in my opinion, mark up your own events on your own page. That's the best way. Susan Stopey asks, can Joy touch on the stuck in pending mode for GMB listings? Did we talk about this already? We did?
No, we didn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Go for it.
so there's a lot of wrong information out there about that. So the reason why there's so many listings in pending mode right now is because of the backlog. So that support backlog that I mentioned, that's like 3 weeks, whatever. Pending listings fall into that same boat because new listings, Google, especially for certain industries, Google's not very trusting of them. So there's something manual that has to happen. And the backlog is so great right now that it's taking them much longer to get listings out of pending mode. So I think right now, again, you're looking at 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
It's not a technical issue. I wish Google would stop saying that.
It's a technical issue because it involves some technology, but other than that, it takes humans to solve it, right?
I think that's their blanket. I don't know. It's a technical issue.
I think it's because it gets people to shut up and leave them alone. So they're like,
Right.
oh, it's a technical issue. Okay. But yeah, they say it a lot of times when it's not a technical issue.
Pam Weber asks, how do you feel about continuing with the
You
service?
skipped Eric's question.
Oh, I did. Sorry. Eric's asked, so a citation from the New York Times would matter for local search too, right? Well,
Yeah,
sure.
And next to getting a Wikipedia article about your business, which is going to send you through the roof, a New York Times article will do great. I had a client who was involved in the SoFi scandals in California who got interviewed in the San Francisco Chronicle, and he saw 6 months of steady gains from that in terms of Maps presence and GMB presence, and very, very powerful. So
I think depending upon your category and your market, hiring a good PR firm or person can do a lot for a business if you can afford it.
Right. An example of this, I don't know if people remember, but several years ago when Obama was still in office, there was a scandal because if you entered the N-word in Google Maps, maybe in relationship with DC, the White House would come up. Well, Google, there was a lot of nefarious and disgusting articles out there about Obama and using that word, and Google associated those words with the White House and Obama, and he ranked in search for it. So I mean, that was how it's supposed to work. I mean, obviously it can be abused, but having articles about your business in solid news media, absolute gold.
Yeah. Okay, we've got like 1 minute left, so let's try a couple more questions. How do you feel about continuing with a service that sends out NAP info to the main data aggregators? I think if you send it out once and it's right on your website, and it's right in Google My Business, I would not continue to pay for that.
Unless you're a business that changes hours all the time or changes something all the time, like a theme park, they have huge problems with getting their hours synced up because Google is like looking at last week's scrape instead of this week's scrape. And you want a single control of that, I think it has value. And it also may have value just from a management point of view, like it's the easiest way to do it. It's hard to develop a canonical source for all your listings, but for a single location, and it's
where nothing changes very much.
Right.
If you're not changing things very much, I agree. Shelley Fagan asks, what are your recommendations for setting up a GMB if you rent a physical office and a larger shared office suite with a mix of other businesses? So I actually have experience with this. Don't rent an office and a larger shared office suite where there are other people in your same category. You're going to have a hot mess. But if they're all unrelated businesses, you're eligible if you have signage, right? If you have a sign that says this is what my business is.
And you staff it and you answer the phone.
Yeah, and you're physically there, and suite numbers do not matter one iota anymore to Google at all, right? That's still the case.
Unless you're using a suite number. It matters to the consumer.
I would put a suite number in if you have a suite number, just to clarify where you are, but it doesn't differentiate your listing from others in that building. This is a big problem we run into with attorneys. We actually had a client where we literally could not get them unfiltered. I told them to move. They didn't like that, but they were in the same building with the same type of attorney, and there was 8 others that they were fighting against, and it was just a really hard battle because they were the newer law firm, and they hadn't been there as long, and they didn't have as much prominence. And like, yeah, I just advise not to.
So that's our hour. There are a few more questions in here that we certainly could answer. I'm not exactly sure how we'll answer the rest of those questions. I think we'll try. And thank you, Mike and Joy, for joining us, and Andrew via Slack message. Thanks for joining in. And thank you, everybody, for attending. I'm sure the recording will be available to everyone shortly. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.